So ever since the Steam Deck launched, I see comments on videos about any handheld, whether that's the Legion Go 2, the ROG Xbox Ally X, or even the Nintendo Switch 2, saying just buy a Steam Deck. Now, as someone that's actually used all of these devices and definitely have some favorites, what makes the Steam Deck tick, and why should you maybe just buy a Steam Deck? Well, at least if you can, considering that every single model is completely out of stock right now, but that's besides the point. See, it's a little complicated, but I don't think anyone's actually wrong here. The Steam Deck OLED might actually just be the best way to get into PC gaming, and it might even be the single best handheld on the market. Now, you might have noticed, unless you've been living under a rock, that we've entered what feels like the Great Depression. At least you'll feel greatly depressed if you have one look at the RAM prices, the SSD pricing, and even the cost of new graphics cards. And because of this, I feel like a lot of people are looking into buying pre-built PCs, which have also become inflated. And there are some who are just looking into handhelds to get their fix. But the thing is, if all you're reading is a spec sheet and buying quote-unquote the best that's out there, like the Legion Go 2, it might require you to start cooking up some suspicious material or just take out a mortgage on your house. And then there's this saving grace, the Steam Deck, which somehow has defied all the odds despite the OLED model being over 2 years old. It's seemingly a better performing and better value device than it ever was at launch. And like, how is this even possible? Well, I'll tell you, but before I do, I just want to say thank you for watching. We are very close to 100,000 subscribers, which is just insane to me. One day, a plaque will be on that wall, and it'll be because of you, so if you're watching, a like and a sub goes a very long way to help support the channel. Anyways, lately I've noticed a trend where a lot of people are starting to talk about the Steam Deck again, but some people make this thing feel like it's a gift from God. And to be honest, the more time that I spend with it, the more I understand why people have become so philosophical about it. There's a few categories that I want to break this video down into. I want to talk about the value, the community behind the Steam Deck, who the Steam Deck is ultimately for, and whether or not this is something that's worth considering here in 2026. So it's important to mention here that even though this is still more of a budget-friendly alternative to other handhelds, it's still expensive. But for that upfront cost of $550 for the 512 gig model, which is the one that I have, it's just that, $550. There's no need to pay for any sort of subscription model. If you already have a Steam account with an extensive game library, most of your games are already compatible. And if you don't worry, because Steam practically gives away games, even heavy hitters like Cyberpunk or Elden Ring, when it comes to their seasonal sales. There's also a really neat plugin that you can download that shows you on the store page when you're looking at a game if you can get that same game for cheaper on another platform. But I will talk about plugins later in the video because I think they're really important to the deck. But for the price of the Steam Deck OLED, you're getting the Steam Deck, a pretty solid carrying case, and a 45-watt power adapter to charge it. There's no need to dump a ton of money into accessories. The only thing that you might really want to consider is a screen protector, and I'll drop links below in the description for the ones that I am using if you're curious. Though when it comes to the deck itself, it's very well built, specifically the OLED model. It has much better improved thumbsticks that aren't as slippery. The OLED display is a touch brighter than the LCD version, and it's also larger, which just makes the games feel much more immersive, especially since its 90 Hz refresh rate is a step above the 60 from the original deck. There's also a bigger battery in here. Its efficiency is slightly better as well, and that does translate to a couple more hours of playtime depending on the titles that you're playing. Ergonomically, the deck is my favorite handheld by far. I'm actually not a fan of controllers with a symmetrical layout. It's why I prefer the Xbox controller over the DualSense for PlayStation, but being on a handheld where you're actually supporting the entire weight of a computer versus just a controller, it actually makes a lot of sense here. Even with smaller hands, the deck rests nicely in my palm. I have a really good grip on it, and the weight, even though it's about 1.4 pounds, it feels so much more relaxed to play for long periods versus something like the Legion Go 2, which is a 2-pound behemoth. And Valve gives you many different ways to play, whether you want to use the touchpads for games that require mouse input. If you want to use gyro controls, you can. And there's also 4 remappable paddles on the back, which are really easy to use and aren't out of reach at all. Now, I do think the deck feels less premium when compared to some other handhelds, but when we're talking about a price difference of close to $1,000, it's something that's honestly really easy to forgive. Now, where the deck gets sort of confusing is the architecture here. The actual CPU and GPU is quite old, and it's slightly outdated these days. It's not going to be something that you're buying in hopes to play the latest AAA games at max settings, because it honestly really isn't that feasible. at least natively. Thankfully though, because the display's native resolution is 800p, which sounds very low, it does benefit the deck since you don't need to push more pixels, destroy your battery life, and ultimately just lower your performance and ruin your entire gaming experience. What's interesting though is that at this size, playing games at 800p is a non-issue. I think they actually look quite good, and this is coming from someone that is like a snob and uses a 4K OLED display as their main monitor. But this is why I wanted to talk about the community behind the Steam Deck, because although on paper this isn't going to throw up insane numbers or have the best time playing some newly released titles, there's a lot that's actually been done here since this is kind of an open source platform. What I mean by that is this is not a Windows handheld at all, which for me is actually its biggest strong point. But I will be clear that since this isn't running Windows, developers have written this thing off for kernel level anti-cheat and most anti-cheat. In fact, a lot of multiplayer competitive titles like Call of Duty, for example, will not run on the Steam Deck. However, there's a massive flip side to this. Linux is easier to run, it's less demanding on the hardware, and because of the lack of overhead, lots of games just run better on Linux than they do on Windows. And if you remember me saying earlier that this is like an open source experience, open source console, well, when I say that, I mean that Linux is open source. And thanks to the community behind the deck, there's plugins that you can use like Decky, which give you essentially a free marketplace to use many different tweaks, whether it's cosmetic with theme changers or performance enhancing ones like lossless scaling or DLSS. So let's take Elden Ring for example. It's a game that I was struggling to run smoothly on the deck, and I was getting about 30 to 45 frames per second with quite a bit of dips. Now using lossless scaling at 2x resolution is now giving me a locked 60, gets me up to 5 hours of playtime, and is completely transformed the way that I use the deck versus it just being for those lighter to run indie titles. There is actually so much to do here and mess with on the Steam Deck, and you don't really need to know anything about Linux or even the deck or computers in general to be able to do these things, thanks to the amount of videos that are just on YouTube about it because of how large the community actually is. It's kind of insane that even after all these years, people are just committed to making the Steam Deck better. And like I said, there's a plugin that you can use for game prices, which bakes into the Steam store. And there's actually a whole lot of these like CSS loaders, which give you themes, can change menu music, and you can do a lot to really make the deck feel like your own and actually personalize it, which is something that I wish I could do on the Nintendo Switch 2, other than just have like a light and dark theme, which to be honest, make the console feel very corporate and like depersonalized. I don't know how we had themes on consoles from Nintendo beforehand, and just with the Switch and Switch 2, it seems like they don't care at all. It's a very minor thing, but for people who actually use these, it's something that we do miss. I also do want to mention that the deck is very solid when it comes to repairability and upgrades. Companies like iFixit have partnered with Valve to provide parts, tutorials, and tools that you need to do any repairs if your console is out of warranty or you just want to tinker with it, which is something that's awesome, and it's definitely something that I wish we had more of in this whole thing. Like, everything I feel like is so against the right to repair, and everything has become super difficult, and I can make a whole video about that because it's actually really infuriating. Okay, now hopefully I didn't lose you talking about the plugins and the more boring stuff when it comes to the deck, because now I want to sort of help you figure out whether the Steam Deck is actually right for you. Look, I've used pretty much every handheld that's released in North America, and I've put hundreds of hours into pretty much all of them. The deck is the one that I keep coming back to for a lot of reasons, and its biggest reason could also be its biggest crutch as well. So I used to favor Windows handhelds. In fact, the Legion Go 2 was insane to me. Being able to play games like Battlefield that I'm only really used to playing on my PC in a handheld form factor whilst still getting over 100 frames per second is nuts. But I also found out that picking up and playing these devices, whether it's the Legion or the Ally and so on, come with a lot more frustration than fun. The way that I approach these handhelds is very different. Like, I don't have a lot of time. I mean, I'm married, I have pets, which basically feel like children, and I have quite a lot of responsibilities on top of doing all of this, which doesn't seem like a lot, but it takes more out of me than any full-time job that I've ever had. And when I want to play video games, I want to be able to just pick up the handheld, plop on the couch, or lay in bed. I want to have it running in seconds. I don't want to have to fiddle around with constant Windows updates, drivers, BIOS updates, or annoying bugs that pop up on Windows all the time, on top of having to constantly check and make sure services like OneDrive don't just magically reappear like some sort of infectious malware. The deck, despite it being a PC, doesn't feel like one at all. Its updates are combined, it's insanely quick, and it doesn't happen every waking second of the day. And Valve's definitely approached this with more of a console-like experience in mind, with the way that the UI is designed down to how everything is managed on here. So if you're like me, and time is somewhat valuable, you're busy, and you just need something painless to use, I think the Steam Deck is a solid option. It also has proper sleep function, and if you're keeping it plugged in at your bedside table or on your desk, it will handle your game updates for you so that when you pick it up, it's actually ready to play. I don't know why this isn't like a really common thing on these handhelds, but it's a lifesaver because game updates for things like, say, Battlefield, for example, could be like 40 gigabytes. That being said, if Call of Duty, Valorant, Fortnite, Destiny, Rainbow Six Siege, PUBG, or even like GTA Online are games that made your ears perk up a bit, I'm sorry, but you can't play them on the deck unless you have a workaround, and that workaround might actually get you banned because of the anti-cheat. So the deck might ultimately just not be for you if that's the case. I look at the Steam Deck as a single player first machine. Whether it's indie games that I'm enjoying or long, grindy RPG games, I use it as an extension to my PC to be able to travel with or blow through some downtime and make some progress in games that I'm enjoying. Something like the Legion Go 2 would be a better option as a handheld if you're more into those competitive or multiplayer titles because of the larger display, its higher refresh rate, and ultimately the better performance. But you will be paying the price. Now, like many of you, I also asked myself the same thing when I picked up a new Steam Deck OLED after selling mine not too long ago. And to be honest, I think now is a better time to buy the OLED if it's something that you're actually interested in for a couple of reasons. Like I mentioned, we're just kind of going through this weird stage in the market where everything is going up due to the rise in AI data centers, and we've already seen this affecting other devices. I hate to keep bringing up the price of these handhelds, but when it comes to the Legion Go 2 specifically, it's expected to see a price increase of up to $500, which is insane, but I also believe it. The deck is the cheapest, simplest, brand new handheld that you can buy. It's supported by the community, repairability is on your side, and when it comes to its future, even though we might be close to a new Steam Deck in the next year or two, I think the OLEDs is very bright. Tie this in with Valve's ecosystem, now the deck isn't going to be the only device running SteamOS, at least from Valve. There's the new Steam frame, there's a whole new Steam machine, and it could be a really great companion to the deck if you want a more living room console experience. And if you're someone that likes to play the deck docked, the Steam controller is going to be a very solid first-party controller that still brings the perk of what the deck has to offer. When it comes to handhelds, really, there's only one that has like this first-party ecosystem, and that's the Switch 2, which I didn't want to bring up too much in this video because I know that they're not entirely related. But even though Lenovo and Asus sell accessories for the Legion and the Ally, it's not as tight-knit or close to what Valve is actually bringing this year. So is the Steam Deck OLED worth it? Honestly, this has been the easiest handheld to recommend since launch, and I can understand why it has such a cult following. I think it's perfect if you want something to just pick up and play casually. It's really fun, it's super light, it's not going to break the bank, and it also, like I said, has that support behind it for you to get the most out of this device as possible. So if you want to see more videos about the deck, I'm not doing this just to hop on the trend. I cover handhelds a lot alongside smartphones. So get subscribed, let me know in the comments down below what you want me to talk about next, and I'll have a look through them and see what comes to mind. As always though, if you enjoyed this video, a like and a sub goes a very long way. I just want to say thank you guys for being here again, and if you've made it all the way through the end of this video, drop a controller emoji in the comments down below so I know who the real ones are, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.